So, Wendy, lots to address there, but are you buying what Stevens is saying?
I mean, I buy it in the abstract, but I sell it in the reason that he traded Jaylen Brown. He's correct that the apron rules have changed the way teams have to think, but I don't. The case that Brad Stevens presented for the reasons he traded Jaylen Brown was not compelling. Okay, he said a lot of words. He was very respectful. He tried to be humble, saying maybe this will work out, maybe this won't work out. You don't trade Jaylen Brown if you're on the fence. You don't trade Jaylen Brown if internally you don't have a compelling case. He just doesn't want to present that case because he doesn't want to be disrespectful to a player who was a finals MVP for them. And so, no, I do not think he was giving the entire case and what they wanted to do, how they viewed it internally. I think internally, they believe that Jaylen Brown's production was not equal to that of a player who's making $57 million. And yes, not only did they pay him that money, they did it of their own volition, but they traded for him for a player who makes $54 million. So it's not even a strong case when you put it that way. And the reporters called him out on that. And he said, you know what? You're right. They do make the same amount of money. And so this is why it's complicated. It's complicated and nuanced. And I think one of the most important things that he said was that he lost sleep over what the fan reaction was going to be, because he knew that when this became public and he saw what the Celtics return was going to be, the fans were not going to understand it and they were not going to get it and they were going to come for him. And he knew that he wasn't going to be able to articulate that Jaylen Brown, despite being an all-NBA player, despite being finals MVP and MVP regular season contender this last year, didn't compute to being worth $57 million for the Celtics. And he also isn't going to say that he believes that with Jason Tatum and their roster that they have built, that they won't take a step backwards, that they may win as many games next year because of how they may distribute their responsibilities on their team to players who earn less. He's not going to say all of those things, but I believe that's what led him to that decision, and I just believe he doesn't want to say it out loud like that.
I'm tired of giving Brad Stevens the benefit of the doubt here. I mean, you go out there and what he said makes sense. Again, the second apron makes it tough to build a team around two superstars like that. It makes perfect sense. We all know this. But it does not help when your owner comes out a few minutes later and says, this was not a money issue. This was about making the team better. So it comes down to one of the fundamental questions of our time. Is it Uchiwale or is it one Mike? Because you got to make this make sense for me. Because if you're talking about losing Jaylen Brown is going to make your team better, then you're going to have to break that down. And Brad Stevens did not want to do that. If it's a money thing, then it's a money thing. I don't understand how these two supposedly super smart guys who are ahead of everybody else in the league come into a press conference on two separate pages when the fundamental question is, why'd you trade Jaylen Brown? One guy says it was money, and the other guy says it was making the team better. And then you flip back to Brad Stevens, who says, I don't know if this makes our team better next season. So what are we doing in the midst of the Jason Tatum window where he's trying to win championships? Are you making the team better, or are you trying to save money, or have you convinced yourself that you can do both while getting rid of a guy who was an MVP candidate last year? Because nothing they're saying is making sense.
Okay, there's a way to split what you're saying and the logic of what you're saying. One, Brad Stevens has to be very respectful of what he says about an outgoing player, an African-American player in the city of Boston, for that organization with the history that that city has had with black athletes dating back decades. You cannot go out there and dump on Jaylen Brown with some of the rhetoric that has been around for the past couple of weeks and the past several years without you looking bad. You want to come across very classy and complimentary. There are multiple things at play here. Do I believe that Brad Stevens feels like he made the right move? Absolutely. Here's why. He said he was worried about the fan reaction and he was losing sleep over that. He never said, I'm losing sleep over the prospect of trading Jaylen Brown. He was steadfast in that belief. Now, it's easier to sell when you're trying to trade him for Giannis. It's a lot different when you're canvassing the league and you're not getting the return that you felt like 4 first-round picks and you wind up trading them for the shadow of what's left of Paul George. Here's the facts, though. With this salary cap era, when you have players who qualify for Supermax, it makes it really, really difficult to build around that. The New York Knicks have 2 Supermax players, except Jaylen Brunson isn't getting paid like a Supermax player, which enables you to pay Mikal Bridges $25 million and Josh Hart $20 million and Karl Anthony Towns, who's going to be up and having to make this very decision. The Knicks are going to have to make a decision on Karl Anthony Towns, or Karl Anthony Towns is going to have to make a decision to take less, because we know that Jaylen Brunson is coming for all of his money next summer. These are questions that exist in the reality of today's NBA. You have very small windows to get things done because financially you have to make very difficult decisions regarding homegrown talent because they're going to get more expensive as they go on. And from a basketball standpoint, they're different players, but they do different things. And if you're looking at how much money Jaylen Brown is quote unquote worth to the Celtics, everything that he does well, the Celtics can say, we got something better at that at home called Jason Tatum, and we're paying you the same thing. So how can we better allocate our salary, redistribute the salary that we have? It's no disrespect to Jaylen Brown, but Jason Tatum was a top 6 MVP candidate the last 4 years. This past year was the first time Jaylen Brown could say such a thing. The Celtics value Jason Tatum more than they value Jaylen Brown because of analytics and a bunch of other things. And once they made that decision, you saw some of the other moves that they made, signing Mitchell Robinson, re-upping with Neemias Queta, guys like that. They wanted to redistribute that money to make it a better team, not necessarily saying that Jaylen Brown makes them a worse team.
Yeah, Wendy, I think that the word that...
David,
Go ahead.
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying, David. And Jess, here's the nuance. And before I say this, I'm not saying this is the way I view it. I'm saying this is the way I believe the Celtics view it, okay? You look at a player like Peyton Pritchard. Peyton Pritchard earns $7 million. He earns $50 million less than Jaylen Brown. $50 million less than Jaylen Brown. You look at what Peyton Pritchard contributes, okay? Then you look at what a player like Baylor Shireman contributes, and you look at what a player like Jordan Walsh contributes, and a player like Hugo Gonzalez. And I know nobody sitting in the 10th row at the Celtics is ever going to say to you that any of those players are better than Jaylen Brown. But put together, their value, their production relative to their salary is more valuable. Now, not better, valuable, okay? And then so then you may say, well, wait a minute. You trade for Paul George. How in the world can you possibly say Paul George at $54 million can compare to the value at all of Jaylen Brown? And Brad Stevens got asked this question, and he talked about optionality. Let me explain to you what he means by that. Paul George is going to play this next season, and if he has a good season with the Celtics, which they believe he will, they can then trade him. They do not have to give him a contract extension that will make him untradeable. In the case of Jaylen Brown, the Celtics believed that Jaylen Brown was going to be seeking a contract extension this summer. And if they gave him that extension, that not only did they think they were not getting $57 million in value out of him, but then he would have become untradeable. And so they believe that getting Paul George, who sometime this season or maybe next summer, plus the 2 draft assets is a better value than having Jaylen Brown. And I know that is a tough thing to sell. And it wasn't something that you had to do in the NBA 3-4 years ago before these aprons. And the 76ers are not going that way. The 76ers have 3 players in Jaylen Brown, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey who make 95% of the cap. That is the thinking that the Celtics are running away from. They're running the other direction. So maybe the 76ers will end up being right, but I'm just trying to explain how the Celtics look at it.
I get you. You just got to do it now. Like you have planted your flag on this is the method to win a championship, right? And what Vinny was saying about you can't go out there and disrespect Jaylen Brown, and I get all of that. But part of what they were doing, making it clear that they were not being what felt truthful in that moment, feels even more disrespectful. It feels like you are saying something like without saying what we already know. Is what you decided to move on from this guy because of all the reasons that Wendy said, because you feel like your team is better with that stuff redistributed. Now you got to go do it. Now you have to go out there with Jason Tatum coming off of trying to make his first full year off of a torn Achilles trying to figure out how to win with these guys that you say now are having an opportunity to be better. If you think Peyton Pritchard's going to be the